Antony Loewenstein. He joins us from Sydney, Australia, and is an Israel affairs analyst and the author of My Israel Question. Antony, always good to have you on the News Hour. So Khader Adnan is just one of many Palestinians that are being held by Israel with no charges being leveled against them. Will his death further inflame tensions? Even though things appear calm right now, this has already been a tumultuous year for Israelis and Palestinians.
Absolutely. I mean, will it escalate into a war? Obviously, one hopes not. But I think the really key point, and your reports say this, and I think this something can only be repeated over and over and over again. So many people who are kept in Israeli prisons are not charged. Like, think about any other country in the world that holds people without charge for years. And the latest figures I've heard is just over 1,000 people in administrative detention. That's the word that Israel uses. People are kept essentially indefinitely. They're accused of various crimes, terrorism and other things, but they're actually not charged. And this, of course, has been condemned by the UN and many other countries. And yet that numbers, in fact, are going up. And it's some of the worst in 15, 20 years in terms of Palestinians who are kept in prisons indefinitely. So will it escalate tensions? Yes. And of course, it's one more thing, right? On top of Israel's far-right government that's been in power now since late last year under Netanyahu. And in some ways, of course, as I've regularly said, Israel wants escalation. You know, much of the international community presumes that, in fact, conflict is bad. But there are certain figures in the Israeli government, the far-right extreme elements, that want conflict, that want tension, that want, in fact, frankly, all-out war with the Palestinian people in the belief that they would win. That's the kind of people that we're dealing with here.
Would they win if there was all-out war?
I mean, it depends what all-out war means. It's a horrific thought. I mean, all-out war between Israel and Palestinians, of course, does not mean just those two parties. It would also inevitably bring other parties in the region, maybe. That could be Hamas, it could be Hezbollah, it could be Iran, who knows who else. I mean, it's an incomprehensible thought in a way, and there hasn't really been that kind of war between Israel and Palestinians since for over 50 years, really. I mean, one thing I think that's really disturbing many of us who write about this issue and who spend time there is there's a growing constituency within the Israeli Jewish population. Recent studies suggest a minority, but certainly a growing minority of people, and in fact, key people in the Israeli government who want mass transfer, ethnic cleansing. In other words, to remove as many Palestinians as possible to neighbouring countries, Jordan, Egypt, who knows where else. Now, that might seem like an extreme position to many viewers who are watching, but this is the position increasingly of many, many Israeli Jews who believe that what happened in 1948, the creation of the State of Israel, did not finish the job, namely removing as many Palestinians as possible. That's what many of us fear is potentially where this is all going.
And of course, any talk of ethnic cleansing is very concerning indeed to all involved. This latest escalation, though, that's happened over the last 24 hours, the ceasefire was brought about because of negotiations with the UN, Qatar and Egypt. It seems to have come about quite quickly, though. Is that something to look forward to, in a sense that because it came about so quickly, this may stop anything from going further?
I think neither side, meaning Israel or Hamas, have any real interest right now, at least in escalation, meaning that Hamas, of course, controls Gaza. Gaza is in economically dire shape. There's no real interest, barring some unforeseen circumstances happening in the future, of having another war with Israel. I mean, ultimately, those wars are horrendously destructive to both sides. They're far more destructive to the Palestinian side. There are far more Palestinians who would die. And having spent time in Gaza, it's an incredibly small area with over 2 million Palestinians, the world's biggest open-air prison. So there's no real interest right now, at least, in some kind of full-blown war. But unfortunately, as we've seen in the last 15 or so years, every 3 or 4 years, there does seem to be another round. It doesn't solve anything. The status quo then continues until the siege of Gaza is lifted, which is what many international community are calling for. This status quo is not sustainable for Palestinians who are in Gaza, who are suffering under an inhumane siege.
Antony Loewenstein, always good to get your take. Speaking to us there from Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you.